The Botswana Democratic Party suffering a historical defeat after governing that country for nearly 6 decades. Shock results indicate that BDP has only won 1 seat, losing its parliamentary majority in this week's general election. Party President Mokgweetsi Masisi has ultimately lost the parliamentary majority, ending a 58-year rule by his organization. As voters in Botswana have rejected the country's longest ruling political party that's been in power since independence, that was in 1966, the Umbrella for Democratic Change Party looks set to form part of this new government. Masisi addressed the media about this result earlier today.
The evidence is overwhelming. We've lost this election massively, right? And we need to come to terms with it and make space and give opportunity to the newly elected leaders and respect them and support them so that they can succeed, because it's Botswana's success that's most important. It's an internal party matter. 2, we have a Central Committee meeting tomorrow. 3, depending on the decision of the Central Committee, we will dialogue with Mandong Grant. It's really a BDP matter, right? But as for me, I think I was quite quick to say I wasn't interested. I would not be seeking re-election.
Sure, the evidence is overwhelming. We have lost this election. Sobering words that I have no doubt are now etched in the history books. But let's make sense of what's just taken place. Bring in SABC News International editor, that's Sophie Mokoena, who's with us once again in our studios. And 24 hours ago, Ms. Sophie, thanks for popping by, you and I were speculating about how what happened at a local government level may very well translate to the national government results. This is not just a loss. It's quite a defeat.
A massive defeat, a humiliation. I mean, if you are not even able to make it as number 2 or 3, that's quite a terrible performance by Mokgweetsi Masisi, leading that party that has been in power for quite a long time. The party established by the former leader of Botswana, not Sekitumile Masiri, I want to say Ian Khama, the father of the former president Ian Khama. And therefore it is quite historic, the former liberation organization, and I think there's a lot to chew and also to unpack in relation to the future of many liberation organizations on the continent.
Absolutely. You've already put out on X that, this is yet another tectonic shift, as it were, in the SADC region, because it's an all too familiar sight, isn't it, for what we've seen here in South Africa?
Yes, you are correct. As we pointed out, the African National Congress a few months ago losing outright majority, and they had to resort to bringing together other parties to form a government. But the reality is the ANC lost its majority. You look at Zambia, it has happened for many years. Lesotho, the same thing has happened. Malawi, and now only Tanzania, Namibia, and Zimbabwe are still holding, including the recently concluded elections in Mozambique. But political and security instability is now dominating the discourse and also the environment in Mozambique. And therefore now we don't know what's going to happen in Namibia in the coming weeks.
Right, and that's exactly what I was going to next. The words of the now presumably outgoing President Mokgweetsi Masisi being very unequivocal at the very onset that they have lost, they do accept, and they now want to facilitate a transition. Something tells me those words are going to land well with those who are listening around the world.
Yes, a good example of being a Democrat at this moment in relation to what President Masisi said earlier on, also facilitating the smooth transition and handing over power. And that will augur well for Botswana in terms of investment and just the political climate. You look at the reports coming from Botswana, there's no even a hint of instability. It looks like it will be business as usual. The challenge will be to ensure that the incoming president will be able to deliver. and the lives of Botswana will change, because if he doesn't, this is a precedence. He will be kicked out of power. And I think many on the continent will be looking at this scenario, and we are likely to see more one-term presidents on the continent.
Sure. I mean, as I said earlier on, we had kind of predicted that this might be the outcome, but something tells me nobody foresaw just the extent of the loss itself. And I wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, what we can pin this down to. Yes, the sentiment on the ground had changed, but I think we had kind of downplayed the extent to which it had.
It is proper planning on the side of the opposition. When I spoke to Duma Poko in July, he indicated that much as they are aggrieved in terms of how the Electoral Commission in that country was taking sides and was failing to be upfront and assisting the opposition to prepare better, they have decided to put together a group of young people who will mend the polling stations to ensure that they monitor every movement of the presiding officers until counting has been concluded and verified and has been confirmed. And that's exactly what they did. Because to win elections, you can campaign as much as you can. On the day of elections, if you are not there on the polling station to ensure that there are no mistakes, you are likely going to experience challenges. And therefore, Botswana, the opposition was very, very aware of that. But secondly, the factor, the former president of Botswana, look, in the previous election, he supported a new party, BPF, much as it didn't perform well at that time, but it was a one small step. Now, this time around, he crisscrossed the country, we are told, quietly in Botswana after returning to Botswana, talking to Botswana. And much as he was not at the forefront and really outright to say, I am back in politics, but he was talking as a former leader, a chief in that country. He was able also to push, and you could see that that party this time around, it got some few seats, and therefore crippling the governing party. And therefore, this speaks to when there's cracks within the governing party is bound to perform badly. And I think the other issues are bread and butter issues. Botswana were not happy in terms of the direction the country was taking, the corruption, the association with Zimbabwe also, and the Zimbabwean ZANU-PF officials being so brazen in going to that country during election, posting on social media their support for the BDP. Yes, we know they are former liberation organization, but don't rub it in, particularly when you know that in your own country you have issues. And therefore, I think the other issue that is becoming a problem, it is the ZANU-PF in the region. It's becoming notorious, but secondly, at the time its president is the leader of the SADC. You know, he even congratulated Mozambique even before the Electoral Commission of Mozambique could pronounce results. And therefore, these issues, leaders are arrogant, they think don't count, and they tend to undermine the voters. And sometimes the voters are watching every move. And I think the issue of arrogance, the issue of sidelining those who supported you when it was not fashionable to do so, always leads to disaster.
Sure. And I suppose a sobering lesson for future leaders. Speaking of that, Duma Boko, I imagine, is going to be a whole lot more of a popular man than he was before this week. You'll tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems there's going to be a lot of focus around him possibly taking over moving forward. He's a lawyer, he's a jurist, he's been in the National Assembly before. What else do we know about him?
Well, I think he's very accessible. I've interacted with him many times. He's quite accessible. And if he's able to maintain that posture, I expect him to be accessible to his people, to the voters, and to be loyal to the ordinary people, Botswana, not necessarily his cabinet or his friends, but he must remember that Botswana have decided that he must take over now and lead them to prosperity. And that should be the focus. Secondly, as you pointed out, he has been there. He's not a newcomer in politics. And also you spoke about his knowledge in terms of legal issues. I mean, his legal mind has been there. He has looked at many issues that are legal of nature in terms of the constitution of that country. So he's got capacity, and he is 54. It's not a young person, but he still has age on his side, and therefore doing the right thing, it's not an option. But, you know, with what I have observed on the continent is that countries get excited, there's a new leader, a year or two on, disappointment. Just look at what's happening in Kenya right now. When Uhuru Kenyatta left office and William Ruto came, and the people supported him because he had a frosty relationship with his predecessor. But now look what he has done. It wasn't even after 4 years, he has chucked out his vice president. The question is, what is this vice president of Kenya is going to do on the ground ahead of elections in Kenya? And those disappointments do come up after that excitement of bringing in a new person or new blood.
Absolutely. We can say the same about Zambia. Hakainde Hichilema, in some instances, voted off the ballot of young voters, and some of them are now expressing their disappointment about the extent to which things seemingly haven't changed. Sophie Mokoena, you and I can speak until the next election, so let's leave it there for now. Thanks as always for helping us connect the dots, and of course, something tells me the story is far from over. Sophie Mokoena is our editor on the international desk here at SABC News. Thanks very much indeed.